Today's session, why can't we plagiarize? And so before we get started, I want you to take a look at this article from the Toronto Star. This is a couple years old, but read the headline there. Excuse me. Top University Health Network doctor steps down amid falsified data investigation. So you can see in the byline there, a top doctor has stepped down from running the country's largest medical laboratory amid a UHN investigation. So falsified data. If you were, a patient of this doctor, this is kind of one of these things where we see it in work, in these situations in the medical field, and even in the business world with falsified information or fraud. And immediately we don't trust these people. They lose their credibility. And at some point, where does that kind of start and where does it stop with university and with academics and with producing information, right? So it's the same thing when we think of the work that we're developing, the work that we're producing in university. All of that has an importance and value in the kind of leading into the career that you're going to take, into the information that you're going to be delivering, and into your own experience as a student, as a thinker, as a scholar. And so producing information that is, not providing, citations, giving credit where credit is due, all of that is so important to, in your university experience. And it builds up your credibility as a scholar and also provides you with the ability to create new content, to build upon already published or produced information. When you hear academic integrity mistakes within the context of, university or school or your own experiences, what are some things that pop into your head? What do you think of when someone says that's an academic integrity mistake?
It wasn't until I was well into university that I started to better understand and take it more seriously. And to me, mostly it was a case of not, if I'm reading papers and books and I'm taking notes, and the closest I ever came to a mistake myself was I had written down just a very small phrase that was a direct quote in my notes, and I forgot to put quotes around it. And sometimes I would be taking notes and quotes, and I would just write down my own ideas at the same time. And in this case, I went back to my notes, a couple of weeks later, and I used a line that was not my idea. And I thought, oh, that's a really nice way of putting it. I must have been really, concentrating that day. And so I didn't get caught, but I noticed it myself after I got my paper back. And I realized without, ever intending to do anything dishonest, that I did, plagiarize. So that was a big wake-up call for me, and then I started to take it a bit more seriously. So yeah, I think maybe like some other people, I hadn't really thought about it carefully until I was well into my university career.
Yeah, and so that's very common with a lot of students, and you might be feeling, unsure, what is an academic integrity mistake, and why do I have to care? And as a student, and Johnny will talk more about this in a bit, but it's not just so that you don't get caught either. It's more to, this is to benefit you as well. And as a student, and kind of thinking of yesterday's talk with Dr. Crooks, and thinking of, what it means to be a university student and creating and developing ideas and information, not just to get a grade, right? So before we get started, I think it's important that we talk about what academic integrity mistakes are. They can, again, to kind of have everyone on the same page. We're all coming from different backgrounds, different schooling systems. So it's important that we know, in terms of within the SMU community, within this definition of what an academic integrity mistake is. And so we're going to be talking about kind of 4 pillars of academic integrity mistakes, or 4 types. So the first one is plagiarism. So this one is the most common one. And it's when you're presenting words, ideas, or techniques of another person or another group or another institution, and you're presenting it as your own work without giving credit. And it applies not just to written work. I think sometimes we think plagiarism is only about writing, but it counts as, can count for any type of information. So whether it's visual, whether it's, conceptual ideas, whether it is a schematic, whether it's a drawing, whatever it is, it's not just contained to writing. That's what plagiarism is. And it's essentially presenting these ideas or words or techniques as your own without giving credit to the original author or the original creator or whoever it is. And so this is an important one, and it's very common, and one of the ones that comes up quite a bit. Later on in a few slides, we're going to be doing some scenarios where you'll be able to see some situations of academic integrity mistakes kind of played out in a real life situation. And these are things that have happened. And just to, some of them, a lot of times I've done this session and students are always shocked by some of these that they even count as a academic integrity mistake. So keep these in mind as we're going through. So cheating, this is the second biggest one or second most common one. And when we think cheating, a lot of times we think, just like this picture here, is peering over somebody's shoulder while they're writing a test and kind of copying their answer. Or, asking your friend to give you their homework and you just copying the answers on your own sheet. But really, broadly, what cheating is an attempt to secure a grade by unethical means. And so what we mean by that is that it could be any way, whether it is resubmitting work, whether it is, even cheating like this, the traditional sense during a test, whether it is, erasing grades that you already got, just fixing your answer and resubmitting it to the prof. Any way that you achieve a grade or secure a grade by unethical means counts as cheating. And a lot of times, plagiarism and cheating, the lines are kind of blurred. So it's important also, to sometimes it's a piece of both of them. It's sometimes not just, it's either this or this. And the other important thing is that helping someone cheat is cheating in itself. So even if whether it's intentional or unintentional, whether you're helping someone cheat, whether someone asks you for their assignment and they tell you, oh, I'm not going to copy it. So whether it's unintentional or intentional, you can also be caught for academic integrity for helping somebody cheat, whether you meant to or whether you didn't. And so this is very important to think about as well as you go through into your academic career. Thirdly, falsification. So again, this one is kind of pertains to falsifying any academic record or use of a falsified record. It also can count as, adding information into an assignment that wasn't there, padding a bibliography, using fake sites or adding sites that you didn't even use or resources that you didn't even use, changing or providing, I should say, maybe a fake doctor's note, or, any type of falsified academic record or using a falsified record. And so this kind of falls under that academic integrity. Lastly, this is the least common one. It's called tampering. But it's also, this one, a lot of people don't think of this one, but it's destroying or hiding any university library materials, hiding a book from other people to get so that you can get it later on, keeping a university library book, destroying it, depriving others or other peers of yours from utilizing it or using that resource. And it can also apply to computer system resources as well. So really, destroying or hiding these materials from, students or other peers that, would deprive them of their use. So those are kind of the four main pillars, and we'll kind of come back to this in a little bit. But keep these in mind. And again, this session isn't about, oh, I don't want to mess up. I don't want to, be anxious about, am I cheating here? Am I plagiarizing? we really want to kind of highlight the importance of, why are we even talking about this? Why is this important for you to know as a university student, and to kind of shed light on that aspect? And so I'll pass it on to Johnny. Or is this my part? So
no, that's great.
Okay.
Yeah. So we thought we'd like to sort of continue this discussion. And we're asking, why is it that we're talking about this on, at the beginning of your university career here at St. Mary's? And I'd like to kind of connect some of these ideas with what we talked about yesterday in our first two sessions, right? So firstly, you might remember Dr. Enns talked about, what motivates us to pursue higher education, what has drawn us, to the university. Now, many people might think, okay, look, I kind of, I want to get a good career, I want a good job and everything. And that might be true, and that's fine, but there's always something more behind it. And that will really develop as you continue your studies at St. Mary's, And then afterwards, you'll remember Dr. Crooks talked about what we might call the foundations of critical thinking, when she described those two allegories. Firstly, the Pink Floyd song, Brick in the Wall, and then Plato's famous allegory of the cave. What we're kind of getting at there is the foundations of critical thinking, about being able to challenge your own convictions and beliefs, and being able, to become comfortable with ambiguity at first, and then really being able to question why you believe things are true. And that's kind of the foundation of why universities exist in the first place. It's where we come, to really cut away the chaff from the wheat and say, okay, what are we looking at here? What is true? No matter how difficult it is to confront, we've got to get to the truth. And that really brings us to this conversation, I think, about integrity and, plagiarism, academic integrity. We're really trying to separate, the very small advances in knowledge that we make every day at a university as an institution. So it is fundamental that there is honesty at the heart of that. And that's why we're here. Okay, if we could continue. So, no matter where you come from, there's going to be different approaches to integrity, and it varies by institution, even to some extent, but it certainly varies from country to country, right? And at the heart of this is something cultural. There's something uniquely cultural about the perspectives we're talking about today. And it goes back to these classical Greek thinkers, right? The foundation of the university, the whole concept came from these scholars, Plato, Socrates, Aristotle. And that was really what they called their telos, right? The reason for existing. So it's closely connected to some of these ideas, and that's why we really concentrated on Plato's allegory. But of course, that is a culturally particular perspective. There are other perspectives on academic integrity and plagiarism. They are equally valid, right? But since we are talking about ensuring your success at a Canadian university, we have got to sort of adapt to this perspective, right? So once again, it is not the only correct way of looking at this, but you have got to conform to this perspective if you're to succeed at university, right? Okay. Okay, so I think I've kind of addressed that, and why it's important. I would say it's because it's at, the foundational level of why, as a community, we have gathered together to pursue knowledge, right? It has got to be at the heart of what we do. And it really, really begins at university. We've probably all, to some extent, taken little shortcuts, throughout our academic career up to here, right? At high school or something, maybe the repercussions weren't so serious, but this is where it does become serious, and that's why we're having this conversation, right? So I'm sure we've all been in a situation where, we're a first-year student, we're overburdened. This is especially true if you're an English language learner, right? Things are much harder than they are for other students. Your schedule is packed, you have so many assignments, and there's going to be a temptation like, okay, I could solve this problem if I just, copy something and change a few words. It gets rid of one headache and I can think about something else. But we've got to look at this through the light of, being against the whole principle of why we're here. Okay, next slide. Okay, now I'm going to look at a couple of different reasons why this goes against our principles. Yesterday, we talked about the university being a kind of community. And in a community, as you know, we all have both obligations to other people, and other people owe us some obligations, right? It's being part of this community has rules for everyone. And these rules concern our values, right? This is what we owe other people as well as ourselves, right? So the idea of honesty, trust, fairness, and respect, right? They are what we owe the institution and what the institution owes us, right? So this is the values of the student, but also the values of our community that we're all part of, right? Whether you're a student, a faculty member, a staff member, this has got to be an equitable community. We all owe this to ourselves and to others. Next is this idea that this is absolutely fundamental to learning. So yesterday, I hope you got a sense that, in many traditional learning environments, and I experienced this, in the UK and to a lesser extent in Canada, it's what we might call teacher-centered. This idea that a teacher passes on knowledge to you and you soak it up like a sponge. But beginning, especially at university, you're going to see that this is what we call a learner-centered environment, right? There's nothing to do with memorization and rote learning. What is fundamentally in play at university is your personal development as a learner. You are now responsible for your own learning. No one's looking over your shoulder saying, did you do your homework? You've got to develop your own autonomy here. So being able, to think carefully and to think about thinking and contributing to this community. This is again, goes back to these values of what you owe this community. So being responsible for your own learning is again one of these foundational ideas, right? It's fundamental to learning in a university environment. One last thing I would say here, if we think back to that article we looked at the very beginning about the doctor in Toronto, I would say I don't know the particulars of the case, but if I had to bet, this person probably took a little shortcut here and there, maybe in high school, and then they were at university and they did an experiment. They thought, if I could just change this by 2%, it would make all of this worthwhile, right? No one's going to know, who cares, And that's, fine, but it's about setting mental habits, right? So you have taken a few shortcuts in the past, nothing happened. I'll do it one more time. I'm sure it's fine, right? But eventually it will catch up to you, right? You might get through university and it didn't matter, but in your professional career, it will eventually catch up to you, right? We have many cases of people having their degrees revoked 20 years after they graduated, right? So it will catch up to you. So it's about setting these habits now on day one of university. So important. Okay. And the last thing I'll mention, again, this goes back to our obligations to ourselves and to our community, right? The whole idea of why we are gathered together is to slowly advance our understanding of the world, right? And to do that, it's so important that ethics are at the heart of it. So just think back again to this introductory article. It really undermines not only that scholar, that doctor's credibility, but also the institutions they were associated with, right? So that hospital has had their credibility called into question, right? So when you violate this sort of code, it's not just you, it's your community that has been violated as well, right? So it undermines your credibility and the institution's credibility. And St. Mary's will do everything it can to protect its integrity as an institution, right? So this is where, again, Amanda will be talking about the consequences later, but I think it's worth mentioning these obligations. It's not just to you. The implications are to the whole community, right? So if you violate this code, you violate it for all of us. Okay.
Great. Thanks, Johnny. So yeah, with that in mind, I think it's important now to, as you're thinking of, what an academic integrity mistake is, the importance of it as well. I think I want you to carry that with you as we're thinking of these scenarios. So we're going to go through a series of scenarios, and, given the time, we might cut some of them out, but just thinking of what this scenario is, what type of academic integrity mistake is, and, think of, why is this even important, in the grand scheme of things? As a university student, if you put your place in these, students in these student scenarios, what is it, why is it important for me as a university student, thinking of what Johnny talked about, is your values as a student, your credibility, advancing scholarship. Think of those things. And let's get right into scenario number one. So Olivia has been assigned a political science essay that needs to be supported with outside sources. She finds many journal articles that relate to her topic. As she writes her paper, she pulls out sentences from the articles and uses a thesaurus to change a few words here and there. After she is done, she cites the information that she used. Do you think this is an academic integrity mistake? Why or why not? And you can, if you want to reread it again, feel free to do so. But do you think this is an academic integrity mistake? And you can, if you feel comfortable, feel free to unmute or just drop it in the chat. And again, this is conversation. There's no judgment here. Don't feel like there's a right or wrong. We're having a conversation here. So please feel free to share in the chat or to unmute as well. So do you think, Olivia, like this is if she's writing this essay, she finds some articles, she uses a thesaurus to, switch out a few words here and there, but she cites it. Do you think this is an academic integrity mistake? You can say yes or no in the chat too, if you want, if you don't feel like elaborating, it's totally fine. Who thinks it is an academic integrity mistake? Anyone?
I feel as though it isn't.
It isn't?
Yeah.
Why? Do you know? Or why do you think that?
Because she only used a certain amount of words inside the essay, instead of like she actually taking it off an internet or an actual credited site and just placing it on her own. She actually changed it up a little, I'm guessing, like her own words.
Right. Okay. Anyone else? Does anyone think it is an academic integrity mistake? I see someone in the chat here. I think it isn't, because she cites where she got the information, but at the same time, she changes a few of the words. Okay. So it looks like most of us are thinking it isn't. Well, surprise, it is an academic integrity mistake. And the reason why, I agree, she does cite, which is great. But the issue here is that she is pulling out these sentences from this article that she found, and she's using a thesaurus. For those who don't know what a thesaurus is, it's basically, you can find it online, or it's a book where you can look up a word and find alternative words that you can use instead of that word. And so the thesaurus here, the focus is in Olivia's paper is that she's taking this information and she's just pulling out words and putting, taking the thesaurus, finding words so that the sentence looks different. The issue here is that this isn't proper paraphrasing. And we'll talk about that later on and how to properly paraphrase. But when you are focusing on just making the sentence look different, you take away from understanding the meaning of the sentence. So kind of going back to what Johnny was talking about in advancing scholarship. The purpose of these essays is that so you advance your scholarship, you develop ideas, you make connections. And so when you are focused on just making a sentence look different, you're taking away from understanding the material and understanding the material of the, in these articles. And so in this case, this would be an academic integrity mistake, and presenting ideas as your own when they really are, the ideas of somebody else. And so this is why, this is an academic integrity mistake, even though she cites the paraphrasing is incorrectly done. The focus is to understand the material and then to put it into your own words. Okay, any questions on that? Is that, clear for everyone? Or do you want me to reiterate that of why that's an academic integrity mistake?
Can you reiterate?
Yeah. So basically, in this case, she does a good job of citing. That's always good. You always want to cite your material, whether you directly quote it, take it directly from the text, or you put it into your own words. But the issue here is that she's just focused on pulling out these sentences from this article and changing the words. She's focused on just making it look different as opposed to understanding the material. And so she's just presenting this information basically, as if it's her own, but, by making it look different so that, it's technically paraphrased. But the purpose of paraphrasing or incorporating information, from another source, but in our own words, like she's doing here or trying to do here, is that we understand the information. So you want to focus less on, okay, I have to make this, how do I put this in different words? How do I, when you're using an outside source, how do I make this look different? You want to focus less on that and more on, okay, I'm going to read this text and I'm going to try my best to understand what is being said. And in doing so, you'll find it'll be easier to put the information in your own words and integrate it and avoid an academic integrity mistake as well. And so this is why, in Olivia's case, this would be an academic integrity mistake. So that you switch the focus from, okay, I have to make this text look different so that I can put it into as a paraphrased information, to how can I better understand what's being said by this author, and how can I incorporate it as supporting evidence for my essay? So do you see that switch in how we're thinking of incorporating information?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what you want to do in your essays, is focus on what is being said here and how does this support my main ideas in my essay. And that'll really help you avoid that thesaurusizing, as it's not the word, I just made it up, thesaurusizing the information from these texts and putting them in, just to make them look different. But there's no real understanding in what's being said.
Can I make one point as well, Amanda? I'm really glad that Nathan asked you to reiterate that, because we might not have mentioned, but both Amanda and I also teach at the university, and this is something we encounter quite a lot. And at least in my case, most of the issues that students run into concerns this. And it is a very fine line between thesaurusizing, I love that word, and proper paraphrasing that we'll talk about later. And, this really is a kind of a difficult, concept to understand, especially if you're not used to, writing in an environment where this will be challenged. So I have a question for you, Amanda. Let's say I was reading a paper and I found something that I really want to use. Now I know I'm not going to thesaurus it. So what would your advice be? How can I take the ideas and use them to support my argument, but not thesaurus? Like what would the next step be?
Yeah, and so that's, the next step would be, maybe we should just skip ahead to the process of paraphrasing, where we can just look quickly, and we'll go back to all of this just given the time, but looking at the steps to paraphrase. So when we're paraphrasing, you're essentially putting in information that you found, outside sources, putting it into your own words. So the steps, and at the end of this session, because we won't get through all of it, I have a handout that I can give you on all of this information, and it includes this as well. But this is a really good way to incorporate a process when you are utilizing information, evidence, articles that you're reading. And what I recommend is you first read the original passage, even if it's a paragraph, if it's the whole text, however you want to do it, to just fully understand it. You just want to sit there and read it to understand it. Now, once you have those ideas in your head, once you understand what the author is saying, I recommend you put that away. You put it away, you don't look at it, and you don't refer to the original. And you write down your ideas, whether it's in point form, whether it's in paragraph format, write it in your own words, or even express the ideas out loud to show that, you understood what the author is saying. And write it down in your own words. Now, what this helps you do is avoid that, going sentence by sentence and going, okay, how can I say this differently? Okay, I have to look up a word in the thesaurus, something that's different than the word discovering. I'm going to use exploring instead. So you want to avoid that and really focus on what is the main idea here and how does it support the point that I'm trying to make, or why am I incorporating this in my paper? And then what you do is, once you have your ideas down, take the original, look at what you wrote, and compare them. Now, this will help you to make sure that your information is accurate, but also accidental plagiarism, to avoid that. Because sometimes when you read something several times, it kind of subconsciously gets stuck in our head and we think we just had a brilliant idea, but really you just read something multiple times. So when you're doing that, just compare and see, okay, did I say this? Does this sound exactly like this article? Or is it accurate? What I said was accurate. And so this process, and again, this is something that you're not going to learn right away. Maybe this is something new, this process, and it's going to take a little bit of time, but keep at it. And the more that you do it, the easier it'll become. Paraphrasing is challenging, and I still struggle with it. But this process of focusing and shifting your focus on, I want to make this look different, to I want to understand what the author is saying and how it fits into my article, is really going to help you understand what's being said, and incorporate evidence in a really meaningful way. And it'll make your essays stronger as well. Mm-hmm. Kind of following here, quotation marks, if you use a direct quote, that's, you don't need to manipulate that or change it. It's basically verbatim, taking the contents, putting it into your essay, but you also still want to provide an explanation of it as well. But in both cases, for paraphrase or a direct quote, you want to make sure that you are providing a source or providing a citation as well. Again, just because it's in your own words and it looks completely different, has different, focus, the ideas are not yours. And so you still want to make sure that you are citing that information. Okay. Is everyone clear on that before we kind of move on? I'm noticing the time, it's 1:45. So maybe we'll do one more scenario and we'll move on to maybe talking a little bit more about some other elements of citation and plagiarism. So let me see this. Okay, let's see this one. Scenario number 4. It's nearing the end of the semester as Anthony scrambles to study for his upcoming marketing final. He notices that he has a sociology paper due the same day. He decides to call up his older cousin, Bryn, who took the course 2 years ago. Anthony asks her to email him one of her old essays. He rearranges some paragraphs, adds in some new information, and submits the paper to the professor. Do you think this is an academic integrity mistake? And I'll give you a second to read through that. And again, feel free to jump in the chat with a yes or a no, or I don't know. It's totally fine if you don't know either. Anybody? Anybody have any ideas? Who thinks it's yes, this is an academic integrity mistake? And again, feel free to put in the chat. Okay, I see HP here says it's plagiarism. All right. Anyone agree? Anyone disagree? I see another yes in the chat.
Yes, I agree.
Nathan says yes. Awesome. Anyone else? Anyone think it's not an academic integrity mistake? All right. So yeah, exactly. This one is one of those straightforward ones where, you know, you want to avoid something we call, this is a type of, I should say, a type of cheating where you're obtaining a grade through unethical means. So in this case, I see in the chat here, Hilda says, yes, it is because it's the same essay. Yeah. So this was already submitted for a grade by Bryn, and Bryn did the work, submitted the work, and now Anthony is asking for it, rearranging it, and submitting it as his own work. So again, unethical obtaining of a grade. Let's say Bryn was a SMU student as well. She was maybe a couple years older. Would she be in trouble for giving her essay to Anthony? What do you think?
Yeah, she would.
Yeah, exactly. Because this, as we said before, cheating and helping someone cheat is cheating in itself. And so again, this is kind of taking away, thinking of what Johnny talked about. This is taking away from Anthony's ability to really understand what is being said in the class, understanding what the essay is about. You know, I understand at the end of the semester, it's stressful. There's so many things due. But, you know, in doing this, Anthony really took away the opportunity or the ability to, you know, work on this essay, to formulate his own ideas, to develop, you know, the contents of, kind of further develop the ideas talked about in the class, make connections by kind of taking somebody's essay that's already been written, taking their ideas and using it as their own. And it really kind of takes away from his credibility as a student, and kind of the credibility of the information that he's been giving, you know, credibility, you know, as a student, you know, has he done this with other work? And so that's something to keep in mind as well. And to keep in mind that if Bryn was a student as well, she would be also, this would be an academic integrity mistake that she would have to deal with as well. And so keep that in mind when we're thinking of, you know, plagiarism and cheating. This one is more of the same. I think we talked about these ones are all the same, but I do want to talk about potential consequences. Again, the focus of today's session isn't just about, you know, what are the sanctions or what are the possible consequences that we could face, but it's important to be informed that there are, you know, consequences to cheating, to plagiarism, tampering, and falsification. And so there are different types of sanctions, and a lot of times it's based on what the professor feels, you know, in terms of the also the severity of it, you know, how you know, did you plagiarize an entire final essay, or was it you incorporated the wrong citation? You know, there's a variety, a kind of a spectrum of you know, standard, severe to very severe offenses. But it's very important to know that, you know, it could lead to standard, which is a failing grade on an assignment, a mark on an assignment where it's a low grade on the assignment. When we get into severe, loss of a scholarship, and even very severe cases. Now, these are rare, but it has happened before where there's expulsion from the university. Again, these are based on maybe it's a recurring offense. It is this, you know, this nature of it, how severe it is. And so again, this is not to scare you, but it's to inform you and, you know, let you know that, you know, these types of academic integrity mistakes are taken very seriously by the university, and that there are, you know, there can be consequences for these actions. And again, You can always refer, and I have it linked at the end, to the academic integrity calendar, not the academic, the undergraduate calendar, which has, I have it highlighted as a section where you can read more on this information. But it's just important to keep in mind, and again, not to scare you or make you nervous about, information that you're submitting, but to inform you and let you know, what, how these are, these academic integrity mistakes can be handled at the university as well. So we touched on quoting and paraphrasing already a little bit. But in the kind of last bit, we talked about direct quotations, and, when we're incorporating information or incorporating outside sources, it's important to think of, the types of ways to do it. So direct quotes is when you are taking word for word the information from a source, putting it into quotation marks because it's exactly how the author said it, and of course citing it. So we can see an example here from Cohen talking about Shakespeare. And this, we know this is exactly what he said because of these quotations here. And this is usually used when the author's words or exact words are very important to the context of the paper. So a lot of times paraphrasing is the choice of how you integrate sources because it shows your understanding. But a lot of times the authors, the way they say things, or, the context of the essay that you're writing, like a literary analysis, that's going to be important to what is being said in how the author's words. So this is, again, something to keep in mind when you are incorporating direct quotes, though. Also make sure that you use a transitional, phrase to introduce it. You don't just want to put a direct quote in your paper and then move on from it. You always want to explain it in your own words as well, explain what's being said or how it links to your essay. Why are you including it, right? So direct quotes are pretty, easy to incorporate because, you don't have to, like we talked about with paraphrasing, you don't really have to focus on putting it into your own words. So again, with paraphrasing, we talked about this already, but it is very important to include paraphrasing in our essays to provide evidence for our points that we're making. As it shows that we understood the information. It can clarify and simplify very complex information or material as well when we're incorporating it into our texts. And it shows understanding within the essay, and it flows nicer as well. It's not disjointed. It flows within your own text that you're writing. Paraphrasing is really kind of in both the social sciences and the sciences. It's what's used mostly in my class that I teach a first-year engineering course, and I tell them to not include quotations. I ask them to not use it because I want them to focus on understanding the content and not focus on just taking somebody's words. Just within the course and the context of the course, I don't think it would benefit them, just to take that information and just put it in quotes. I want to see that they understood it. And so in a lot of your courses, you may be asked to really focus on paraphrasing. And so we can see here, this is a paraphrased piece of text because there's no quotations, but there's still a citation. We're still giving credit to the author or the original author of the text. So we already went through this, and again, I'll be sharing that handout with you so that you can kind of get a full scope of what a paraphrasing is and to have this with you as you go through your classes. So this comparison here, just quickly, as we are looking at what paraphrasing is, just to show you the difference. So it might be a little tricky to see in that comparison, but this is the original text, and excuse me, it's from the National Science Foundation. We know it's a direct quote because we have those quotations here, and we have a citation. The year, this is the organization and the year. And let's say you were asked to paraphrase this. Now, the process that you'd want to take is to avoid going sentence by sentence and going, okay, trees that have more carbon relative to nitrogen in their leaves, okay, how can I say that differently? You want to avoid that. What you want to do is read it in full, understand the information, and then put it in your own words. Now, looking at these two, and I'll give you a minute or so just to look at it. Why do you think this one is a poor paraphrase? So exactly, as you're comparing sentence by sentence, you notice that it just is following the exact trend of this paragraph, but it's just kind of switching out some words here and there. And although on the surface it looks different, it's essentially kind of copying exactly. And because there's no, quotations here, we, as the reader, we assume, oh, this is in the author's own words. They're just using, this is their source. But we really want to focus and kind of take away from doing that, where we're just going sentence by sentence and focusing on the structure, to something like this, where this is an improved paraphrase. And again, you can kind of see I'll give you a second to read through it, but when we're comparing the original text to the improved paraphrase, we can see that there is less of a focus on, okay, how am I going to say this sentence differently? And more of a focus on incorporating the evidence or incorporating the information in a way that is, shows understanding, relates to the essay itself, and also provides, more of a clarity on the information being provided in the original text. And you see that focus shift if I go back to the poor paraphrase, where it's really just, the language is weak as well. It's not as detailed. And it's kind of following the same structure as the original text. To this here, where you see some context, you see that the author really focused on improving the information being said. And, showing that they understood what's being talked about from this NSF article. And, showing that when you incorporate this improved paraphrase, you're showing your reader that you understood the information. And so again, this is something that is a skill, and with skills, you have to practice them. And so you may feel, okay, these paraphrasing is taking me so long, and you might feel discouraged. But the more that you practice, the more that you do it, the easier it'll become. And again, always remember to not just include an in-text citation, which is this here. Maybe if you're not familiar, an in-text citation is included within the body of the paper. And then you always want to include a reference at the end, your last page, a reference in whichever style. In this case, when you're writing your paper, NSF, let's say I wanted more information. I go to the end of your paper and I find this full reference. And again, think of, this helps advance scholarship. It helps, if I wanted to learn more about this topic, I can go here, click on this link, and I can go into learning more about thicker leaf tropical plants and how they might flourish under climate change, if that interested me. So quickly, kind of to wrap up, when you are incorporating citations, when do we incorporate them? Always, unless the idea comes from you or is common knowledge. And again, it's always better to oversight or to cite with intention, of course, than to incorporate an idea that isn't yours without a citation. And again, there's different styles, and here are some examples of these different styles. You don't have to memorize them. I mean, I've been writing for many years, and I still haven't memorized all of the little details. But, there are style guides out there for you to utilize. It's just about making sure that you're really accurately incorporating these citations. So in-text citations will look different in APA than they do in MLA. There's no comma in between. For example, in Chicago, it's called a footnote. It's not called an in-text citation. You notice that, there's different types of information that's incorporated in the APA reference, then is incorporated in the Chicago. So again, not to make you feel like you have to memorize, but be aware of what your prof is asking you, which style to use, and then find the appropriate resource to help you, guide you. At the Writing Center, we have a series of style guides for each department that you can use, and it really breaks it down into a really easy way to incorporate references and to format them. So don't feel like you have to memorize these, but just know that you need to use them, and that there are support resources out there for you to incorporate. So here, which leads into helpful resources. And again, in that handout that I'm going to send you, it has all that information in it as well. But really, utilize, if citing is something, or referencing or incorporating citations is something new to you, reach out to these supports. They're very helpful. They're put in place to help you learn, to help you engage in the information. And you can see whether it's at the Writing Center, these style guides. The Patrick Power Library has an Academic Integrity Foundations course, which kind of guides you through in a lot of detail. The SMUSA website, they have a section on academic integrity, getting help. If you do get caught for an academic integrity mistake, they have support resources to guide you through the process, to advocate for you. So visit their website. And then, of course, the undergraduate academic calendar has all of this information on academic integrity, what is plagiarism, what is cheating, kind of in a lot more detail. And it also explains your responsibility as a student.
One thing I would say, just to reiterate, especially to new students, as you pointed out in depth, Amanda, that there are just tremendous supports available, throughout the Studio for Teaching and Learning, the Writing Center, and elsewhere at the university. So, a lot of it, as a first-year student, a lot of this would have been new to me, and I definitely would have needed a little bit more support. Unfortunately, those supports weren't available to me first time round, but I really, really recommend, even just to drop in for a chat and a coffee with the tutors at the Writing Center, to get some support. I also don't mind admitting that as a mature student in my 30s, coming back to St. Mary's, on my first week, I went to the Writing Center and had a couple of appointments just to get back thinking about these things again. There's no shame at all. We work with faculty members in their writing to make sure, and occasionally pick up on little things that need clarification when it comes to integrity. So there shouldn't be any barrier to stop you coming and talking to the people in the Writing Center. So I just wanted to say that, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this conversation today, Amanda. Thank you very much.